Have you ever imagined that just behind the door across the street, a secret powerful enough to shake the world was quietly growing? Maple Hollow is that kind of town, small, cold, and so peaceful that people believed crime couldn't take root there. But one winter morning, amidst the howling wind and fresh snow, a young boy vanished without a trace. And from that day on, the town was never the same. Joshua, 5 years old, red-haired with an innocent smile, was no ordinary child. He was the son of Lucien Devereux, the mogul behind the Balenciaga fashion empire. When a media scandal threatened to engulf the family, Lucien didn't run with his son. He hid him, and that responsibility fell to a quiet couple living deep in the snowy north, Ethan and Claire Coulter. What they didn't know was that they weren't just sheltering a child. They were hiding a ticking time bomb called destiny. There are small towns where people believe bad things just don't happen. Maple Hollow was one of those places, until one quiet winter morning when snow fell as softly as a breath and a child vanished, shattering that peace forever. Joshua didn't enter the lives of Ethan and Claire Coulter as a blessing, but as a mission, a responsibility no one could know about. The 5-year-old red-headed boy was blood kin to Lucien Devereux, the man behind the famed Balenciaga fashion empire. As the media swarmed his family over a financial scandal tied to the brand, Lucien needed somewhere far from the spotlight, somewhere safe. A trustworthy family, Ethan, his distant cousin, took on the task with his wife, quietly raising Joshua in Maple Hollow. And Maple Hollow was truly peaceful. A small northern Minnesota town of just 2,000 people, where winters blanketed everything in white, and neighbors were so trusting they rarely locked their doors. Joshua fit in quickly. He was bright, sensitive, and had a smile that could light up the whole house. Until that morning, the snow was thick that day, soft and white like powder. Joshua begged to go outside and play. Ethan agreed, just like he always did. But this time, when he returned 20 minutes later, the yard was empty. No laughter, no footprints leading away. Just a cold, white silence, and something inside Ethan's heart quietly, irreversibly broke. They say time heals all wounds. But for Ethan and Claire Coulter, time only formed a scab over the pain, while underneath it still bled every single day. 8 years had passed since that fateful snowy morning. The police had closed the case, a disappearance without a trace, presumed dead. The media dubbed it Minnesota's Snow White Mystery, treating it like a tragic romantic tale before moving on to the next headline. Only Ethan and Claire couldn't move on. The house where Joshua once laughed remained untouched. His bedroom preserved like a museum of memories. On the dining table, police files and sketch composites replaced the warm meals that once brought comfort. Each day blurred into the next, except for those nights when Ethan dreamed of his son's laughter ringing out before vanishing into silence. The Devereux family still offered quiet support. They had enough money to fund a lifetime search for Joshua if they chose. But no amount of wealth could buy the one thing that mattered most, the truth. Claire clung to routine cleaning. The house, folding clothes, washing curtains, as if keeping things spotless, could somehow scrub away the pain. Ethan was different. He buried himself in every file, every faint clue, as if living in a sleepwalk, powered by hope. Only one person truly understood the weight of that silence. Harold Stevens, the neighbor across the street. He had once been a kind man with a wife and a young son, but ever since the robbery 10 years ago when his family was murdered inside their own home, Harold had changed, withdrawn, wordless. Like a ghost, haunting a house with no lights on. Ethan and Claire had spoken to him once back in the beginning, but grief drove them all to separate islands, each lost in their own sorrow, too afraid to meet each other's gaze, in case they saw their own pain reflected back, until one late winter day, when the wind swept white snow across silent rooftops, and their backyard fence collapsed, landing halfway across Harold's yard. There are things so small people overlook them. A broken fence, a vague excuse, a glance that doesn't meet yours, but looking back, you realize the signs were there all along. That morning, Harold knocked on the door wearing his usual expression, stern, not exactly friendly, but not hostile either. "Sorry, but your fence fell into my yard again after last night's storm," he said in a flat tone like he was reading the weather report. Ethan apologized immediately. "I'll fix it. My welder's been broken for a while, haven't had the chance to replace it." Harold waved it off. "No worries, I patched it up for now, had the tools handy anyway." Something about his tone unsettled Ethan. Not the words themselves, but the cold, mechanical way he said them, as if helping was an obligation, not a neighborly gesture. All morning, Ethan could hear the sounds of hammering, sawing, and welding coming from Harold's backyard while he stood in the kitchen. Claire walked in carrying a laundry basket. "He's fixing the fence for us. How long has it been since we last spoke to Harold?" Ethan nodded slowly. Since the first year after Joshua disappeared, so nearly 7 years. Claire was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "We should invite him for dinner to thank him for the fence, and maybe try to reconnect." Ethan hesitated. "I was planning to go through those old reports tonight. The police just sent over some new info." Claire placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her eyes sad but firm. "Ethan, we're fading from the world too, bit by bit." And as always, Claire's look made Ethan nod. He put on his coat, stepped out into the snowy street, crossed the narrow road, and knocked on Harold's door. No answer the first time, or the second. Ethan circled around back toward the sound of wood being chiseled. Harold was crouched inside an old dog kennel, fiddling with something like he was repairing it. When Ethan called out, he flinched, nearly hitting his head on a crossbeam. "Oh, Ethan, didn't hear you calling." Ethan offered a faint smile. "We were wondering if you'd like to come over for dinner. Claire wanted to thank you for the fence." Harold stood up, subtly blocking the view into the kennel. "Tonight I'm afraid I've got plans. Meeting some old friends." Ethan paused. Old friends. Harold. The man who'd lived in near isolation for almost a decade. "Oh, no problem. If your plans change, feel free to drop by." 6 o'clock. Harold nodded, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, but said nothing more. Ethan turned to leave, but the image lingered in his mind. Harold standing between him and the kennel, like he was hiding a door, like he was hiding something that shouldn't be seen. When a lonely person shows up to a gathering, they usually bring 2 things: a gift and a secret. But some secrets are so heavy, they make the whole room colder when they enter. Harold arrived at exactly 6 p.m., in his hands a cheap bottle of wine. His coat was dusted with fresh snow. "For dinner, hope it suits your taste," he said flatly. Claire accepted the bottle with a smile. "Thank you for coming." Harold gave a small nod and stepped inside. The man who was once a friendly neighbor now seemed more like a shadow present, but barely real. Dinner was simple. Claire had made a classic stew, tender beef, carrots, potatoes, warm dinner rolls. Steam rose, gently filling the kitchen with warmth. They chatted about the weather, the neighborhood. A few roads closed off due to snow. Ethan tried to keep things light, but every twitch, every averted glance from Harold made him uneasy. "Heard you're fixing up the old dog kennel," Ethan said casually. "Planning to get a dog again." Harold set down his spoon. "Yeah, went to the shelter this morning. Brought home a male German Shepherd about a year old." Ethan glanced at Claire, a silent confirmation. Harold had lied earlier about having plans with friends. "That was quick," Ethan said lightly. "I used to have one. Usually takes a lot of paperwork," Harold replied bluntly. "I reserved him a few days ago. Just picked him up today." Ethan didn't press further, but in his mind, notes were being pinned to a wall. Harold had said earlier he wasn't sure what breed he wanted. Now he claims he placed a reservation days ago and skipped dinner for it. Claire tried to steer the conversation gently. "Mr. Harold, Ethan told me you lost your wife and son 10 years ago. We understand grief too. Different circumstances, but..." She didn't get to finish. Harold suddenly stood up, chair scraping loudly across the floor. "Sorry, I left the dog outside. He's still getting used to the place. It's getting cold. I should bring him in." Before Claire could respond, Harold grabbed his coat, but not the wine, and not his gloves. Only, Ethan noticed Harold's exit was too sudden, like a puppet being pulled by a string. The door shut behind him. Outside, the snow was falling again, thicker now. Claire turned to her husband. "That was strange. Something feels off." Ethan didn't answer. He was staring at the empty coat hook on the wall Harold had left in such a hurry. He'd forgotten his coat, but he said he was going out, to bring the dog inside in the middle of falling snow. Ethan stood up. "I'll take his coat over," he said. His voice was low, but his clenched fist said more. He knew something was about to be uncovered tonight. Not every door leads to light. Some doors open downward into places darker, deeper, and impossible to unsee once you've looked in. Ethan grabbed 2 coats, Harold's and his own, and crossed the snow-covered street. Each step sank deep and heavy, but it wasn't the cold wind that made him shiver. It was his instinct. Harold's house was dark, all lights off, except for a faint glow coming from the backyard, the direction of the dog kennel. He knocked 3 times, waited silence, knocked again. Still no footsteps, no barking, no response. Ethan turned to leave, then he heard something. Very faint, a soft scratching on wood. Then, a low, guttural whine like some animal trying to call out. He made his way around to the backyard, ankle-deep in snow. The light from the kitchen window barely illuminated the large German shepherd chained near the kennel. It was pacing unsteady like it had been starved or was deeply distressed. Harold, Ethan called, scanning the yard. "I brought your coat." No reply. Ethan knelt to calm the dog and noticed something strange. The kennel Harold had been fixing that morning wasn't just a kennel. He stood up, walked closer. The door was slightly ajar. Inside wasn't straw or bedding, but a clean, solid wooden floor, and a small padlock sitting loosely on it. Right in the center was a recessed metal handle, flush with the wood. Ethan knelt down. His heart thudded in his chest. He touched the handle. It wasn't locked. The padlock was just there, not to secure, just to suggest fear. He lifted the wooden panel slowly. The hinge groaned like something tearing through the silence of the night. A dark void opened below a trap door, leading down cold air, rising from within, carrying the scent of damp dust and something unnamed. A spiral iron staircase disappeared into the blackness. Ethan gripped the railing, feeling the world tilt toward the hole. He pulled out his phone, dialed Claire. "I found something under the kennel," he said quickly. "Might be a basement. Harold could be down there." "Signal's weak. Call the police, ask for a welfare check." "Ethan," Claire said, worried. "Please don't go down. You promised." "I'm not going," he said, even though part of him already was. "I'll wait, but I need to make sure he's not hurt." Just then, a sound echoed from below. Thud, thud, clang footsteps on metal stairs. Ethan dropped the panel shut by instinct, heart pounding. A second later, it creaked open again from beneath. A hand pushed the wooden hatch aside. Then a figure emerged, crawling up from the dark, hair-disheveled face, flushed from cold, Harold. He froze when he saw Ethan standing there, coat in hand. "Ethan." His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed panic. "You okay?" Ethan kept his tone steady. "Your dog's still chained out here. I got worried. Saw your lights off." Harold stepped fully out and positioned himself over the trap door. "Just checking on some old stuff. There's a storage cellar. Nothing important." Ethan nodded, but his eyes locked onto Harold's forehead, damp with sweat, not from cold, from fear. "All right, I won't keep you. Just wanted to return your coat." Claire says hello. He handed over the coat. Harold took it. His hand trembling slightly, Ethan turned to leave. No questions, no accusations, no rush. But in his mind, one question echoed louder than everything else. Who or what are you hiding down there? Some secrets refuse to stay buried. Once a door has been opened, the truth cannot be hidden again. Ethan stepped back, snow crunching under his boots, eyes locked on Harold. The man was blocking the trap door, breathing hard, not from the cold, but from rushing up out of the darkness. "You sure you're all right?" Ethan asked again, trying to sound casual. "I'm fine." Harold glanced quickly at the kennel, then back at Ethan, like weighing something in his mind. "Just clearing out some old stuff. Your dog's been barking nonstop," Ethan said. "I thought something was wrong. That's why I came over." Harold gave a small nod. He's not used to the new place. "Still anxious. Seems like he doesn't like the kennel much," Ethan said lightly. He kept staring at it. The seemingly harmless comment hit something. Harold's expression changed in an instant, a furrowed brow, then a sharp, cold stare, like it cut right through the snow and wind. Ethan felt the air tighten around them, something unseen, but stretched taut, ready to snap. He chose to retreat. Well, I'll head back. We're still expecting you at 6 if you want to come by. Claire made a lot of food. Sure, Harold said, but his gaze wasn't in the moment. It was somewhere else entirely calculating. Ethan returned home, a weight pressing on his chest. Claire looked up from the table, said nothing, but her eyes said it all. She could feel it too. Something terrible was coming. He said he was cleaning out the cellar, Ethan said, hanging up his coat, but he was sweating, shaking. Something's wrong. Claire's voice was anxious. Should we call the police? Ethan hesitated. Not yet, but if he doesn't come back, you call them. The rest of the evening, Ethan sat on edge. He kept glancing out the window toward Harold's house through the soft veil of falling snow. 6 o'clock. 6. 10. Finally, Harold showed up, but not as a man at ease. He was stiff, his smile forced. He brought another bottle of wine, walked in, sat down, like nothing had happened, but his eyes kept darting away. His hand trembled each time he lifted his glass. Ethan let the silence settle for a while. Claire tried to hold the conversation, talking about the food, the weather, old stories, but Ethan couldn't hold it any longer. Where did you say you got the dog? He asked, voice calm. Northwoods. Kennels. Harold answered without blinking. Strange, I was at the store this afternoon, saw your car there. You said you had plans with friends, but I saw you go in alone. Silence. A thick, frozen pause. Maybe I changed plans. Harold shrugged. My friend canceled, so I went to get the dog. What's odd about that? Ethan stared him down. You said you weren't sure what breed you wanted, then said you'd already reserved one. Picked up the dog in 10 minutes, no paperwork. Harold gripped his wine glass tightly. What exactly are you implying? Ethan didn't flinch. I think you're lying. The air cracked like a glass pane under too much pressure. Claire jumped in. We're just concerned. Harold, if something's wrong, you can talk to us. Harold stood abruptly. I should go. I forgot. To feed the dog. Ethan stood too. Let me walk you back. It's cold. No need. Harold turned to leave, forgetting his coat for the second time. The door slammed behind him. Claire looked at Ethan, now visibly shaken. Ethan, something's really wrong. Ethan nodded. I can't wait any longer. He grabbed his phone, battery 12%. Call the police, he said. Tell them it's a welfare check. There's a chance Harold is keeping someone down in that cellar. Claire went pale. Are you going back over there? Ethan stared out the window, eyes fixed on the house, fading into darkness. No, he said, not unless I have to. But deep down, he already knew. This time, he wouldn't stop at the doorstep. There are moments when time feels torn open, when a name buried deep in your heart is spoken from an unexpected place in an unfamiliar voice, yet the heart still knows. When the police arrived, Harold had already vanished from the front of the house. Ethan met them outside, pointing toward the back. The cellar's under the dog kennel. You need to check it. Something's not right. 2 young officers moved in, one shone a flashlight. The other kept a hand on his holster, ready just in case Ethan didn't follow. He stood motionless in the snow, eyes fixed on that old kennel. The black hole beneath it seemed to gape, waiting to swallow the truth he'd feared for 8 years. Then a voice called from the back. Someone's coming up. Everything froze for a moment. One officer drew his weapon. Hands up, he shouted. A small figure appeared from the trapdoor, a boy, red hair tangled in shoulder length, thin skin, pale from lack of sunlight. He trembled, both hands gripping a handgun. Eyes wild, terrified like a cornered animal, Ethan froze. Guns raised, an officer shouted, "Put the weapon down, kid. It's okay." But the boy stepped back, his arms shaking violently. Then he screamed, "Don't come closer. I'll protect my father. I won't let you kill him." Ethan's breath caught, that fragile voice, shaking. Afraid wasn't unfamiliar. It echoed from a shattered memory. The voice of Joshua. He whispered the name, barely believing it, left his lips. Joshua. The boy whipped around, his eyes went wide. Joshua, that's your name, Ethan said, voice cracking. Your real name. You are Joshua, Elric Devereux. No, my name is Jack, the boy shouted. My dad named me. My mom died in the war. He said I had to stay in the bunker, had to hide from the enemy. You're soldiers. You came to kill me. A female officer stepped forward gently. No one's here to hurt you. You're safe now. You don't need the gun. The boy still wouldn't drop it. Claire appeared, without hesitation. Without fear, she pulled out her phone and opened her lock screen, a photo of a 5-year-old red-haired boy laughing in the snow. Look, Joshua, she said, her tears falling freely. You're the boy in this picture. You are my son. You disappeared 8 years ago. I've been searching for you for 8 years. The boy froze. His eyes shifted from the photo to the woman's face, trembling like flickers of forgotten memory in a long, dark night. A small spark lit in his chest, a flash of recognition. Why aren't you dead? He asked, voice cracking. No, sweetheart, Claire whispered. Never. Your dad and I were alive. We've been waiting for you. We're not in a war. No one here is a soldier. There's only one man who lied to you all these years. The boy stumbled. The gun dropped into the snow. The officers rushed in, picked it up, and secured it safely. Joshua didn't resist. He just stood there like a soul stepping out of the dark. Where's my dad? He asked in the voice of a child whose world had just crumbled. Ethan stepped forward. The man you thought was your father, he's not your real dad. His name is Harold Stevens. He kidnapped you. He raised you in that bunker and built a false world to keep you there. Joshua stepped back, then sank to the ground. Claire knelt beside him, not touching him, but placing her hand close. It's over now. You don't have to be afraid. We're here. Joshua looked up at the two of them faces. He couldn't quite remember, but something inside him recognized something old, something real, like warmth in the heart of winter. Some people don't kill with knives or guns. They kill with isolation, with repeated words, with a meticulously crafted illusion until the victim forgets who they are. When Harold was led into the police car in handcuffs, he didn't say a word. No struggle, no shouting, just a middle-aged man with empty eyes, as if the part of him that was once human had long since unraveled. The cellar beneath the kennel was quickly sealed off. Police forensic teams and crisis counselors flooded Harold's yard, moving quietly and carefully, as if they were excavating an ancient grave buried beneath snow. Ethan stood beside Claire, holding her trembling shoulders. Joshua, now wrapped in a thermal blanket, sat silently by the ambulance. His eyes were vacant. An officer approached. We found a fully functioning sealed space beneath the kennel ventilation system, generator, water filter, food stocks arranged by week. There were books, exercises, even workout equipment. Claire's voice caught. He planned this a long time ago. The officer nodded. That's not all. We found journals. Detailed logs of the child's training. He called Joshua Jack. Recorded daily physical regimens, weapons lessons, and how to identify the enemy, which meant anyone outside the bunker. Ethan clenched his fists. Why would he do this? There was no immediate answer, but soon, Harold's psychological file began to unfold. 10 years ago, Harold's wife and son were murdered during a home invasion. After that, he collapsed, cut himself off from the world, but he never forgot. Instead of facing reality, he rebuilt his family inside his mind. When he saw Joshua, a red-haired child temporarily living with relatives, Harold didn't see a boy. He saw an opportunity, a replica, a second son, a fresh start. He kidnapped the boy, created a war-torn world, and isolated Joshua entirely from reality. No ransom, no blackmail, no motive other than pure delusional control, hidden behind the mask of quiet neighborly kindness. Police found inside the bunker a detailed training schedule adjusted as Joshua aged, hand-drawn war maps, a code box Harold used to send fake encrypted messages from the outside, a weapons collection suppressed firearms, tactical knives, restraints. They also uncovered a blueprint for expanding the bunker. Harold appeared to be planning a second level, a larger dog cage under construction, likely meant to confine Joshua if the original space was deemed too exposed. The officer was blunt. He was losing control. Joshua had started asking questions, wanting to go outside. We believe Harold was preparing to restrain him permanently or convert him into a tool. Ethan gripped Claire's hand tightly. And if we hadn't found him in time, He couldn't finish the sentence. Meanwhile, Joshua sat in the ambulance, attended by a psychologist and a nurse. "Can you tell me your name?" the therapist asked gently. The boy looked at them, hesitated, and then whispered, "Joshua," like someone relearning a name that had been stolen from his memory. He lowered his head and asked, "If there's no war out there, then does that mean everything I learned was wrong?" The doctor answered softly. "It wasn't your fault. It's the fault of the adult who taught you something untrue." Joshua looked up. "So, my mom is real." Claire stepped forward. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I'm here." Joshua stared at her for a long time, then for the first time since he emerged, he cried. Not every rescued child runs into their parents' arms and instantly feels home. Some reunions don't align seamlessly because of Pain Gap's time, but sometimes a single spark is enough to begin again. Joshua was taken to Maple Hollow Memorial Hospital that same night. The boy who had lived like a shadow underground now lay under stark white hospital lights, surrounded by machines and concerned eyes. Initial medical report: mild malnutrition, severe vitamin D deficiency due to lack of sunlight, low physical strength but no signs of physical abuse, psychological distress, complex PTSD symptoms. But what worried the doctors most was how he perceived the world. Joshua didn't know who the president was. He couldn't distinguish between movies and reality. He believed the war was still ongoing and everything Harold had said was absolute truth. He looked at a smartphone like it was alien tech. Upon seeing YouTube, he asked, "Is this a spy camera feed?" Lucien Devereux, Joshua's biological father and head of the Balenciaga fashion empire, flew in from Europe that very night, but he didn't enter the room. No hug, no introduction. He stood behind the glass eyes, red but expression cold, like a man used to controlling the uncontrollable. Ethan and Claire understood Joshua didn't need another stranger. Not right now. In the days that followed, a new journey began. Not a return to family, but the rebuilding of trust from scratch. Ethan brought old photo albums, baby pictures, park trips, Joshua's first time eating ice cream. Claire read the stories she used to read him, her voice shaky, but still gentle. Joshua kept his distance at first, but then one morning, as Claire slept, slumped by his bedside, Joshua gently pulled the blanket over her. Just one gesture. Small, but the first step across an 8-year chasm of loss. As for Harold, he was charged with intentional child abduction, unlawful confinement, possession and storage of illegal weapons, psychological abuse of a minor. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation, but journals and records showed he was fully aware of his actions, though consumed by delusion. The media swarmed like a wave, from local papers to CNN, BBC, the New York Times. The story Joshua, the Balenciaga heir, held underground for 8 years, dominated global headlines. The Devereux family refused all interviews. Claire gave the press only one statement: "We don't need the world's sympathy. We just want Joshua to live like a normal child." A month later, they left Maple Hollow for a place where no one knew their names. A small house by the sea, where the light shifted by the hour and wind moved across wooden steps. Joshua started drawing. He didn't remember his old classes, but his hand remembered how to hold a pencil. One day, Ethan asked, "What are you drawing?" Joshua answered, "The light coming through the crack in the bunker. The first thing I saw outside the dark." Ethan said nothing. He just sat beside his son. Some stories don't end with applause or miracles. They end with patience, with sleepless nights, with small whispers like, "Good morning," "Sleep well," "Are you okay today?" And with a love that never gives up. Some losses break people. Some reunions make us believe everything will go back to the way it was. But the truth is, no one truly comes back the same after living in the dark for too long. People don't return. They learn how to live again. From the beginning, Joshua, a boy once held underground, raised in a fabricated world, was not just a victim of abduction. He was a victim of prolonged loneliness, of an unhealed tragedy, and of an adult who had lost faith in life itself. But this story isn't just about a crime. It's a reminder that love, when patient and genuine, can bring someone back from a place where no one was supposed to survive. And sometimes to save a child, it's not enough to find them. You have to wait until they're ready to believe they're loved again. Not all wounds bleed, but all wounds need to be seen. In psychology, we call it healing through truth, and the first truth that must be acknowledged is that the child was once lost. Dr. Miriam Levesque, specialist in post-abduction trauma recovery for minors.